One of the panels that I was looking forward to most at CitizenCon was any of them involving organizations and organization activities. Unfortunately, like most of CitizenCon, I was left with more questions than I had answers. Now don't get me wrong, I liked what I saw at CitizenCon, and I'm actually far more excited for the game than ever before. But a lot of the stuff pertaining to organizations, system ownership, stations, and bases, again, has me concerned. Generally, in a game, I am against any type of player organization actually owning things independent of the rest of the game, at least in the PvP game. The reason for that is that typically in these types of games, you will have one organization owning a majority of the important, let's say, resources or whatever it may be, monopolizing them and cutting off a large section of the game from other players. Additionally, players in these organizations may be incentivized to ally up and create an alliance that simply cannot be beat. And if any of you have played the most recent MMORPG failure that was and is Throne and Liberty, then you know exactly what I'm talking about when it comes to guild alliances and taking over servers. The player's response simply wasn't to get together and fight them like it's some type of story or another game from 15 or 20 years ago. They simply stopped playing. And there's two reasons for that. The first is, times change, people don't have time for that anymore. And the second reason is because the rich keep getting richer. And that is why I tend to prefer a faction-based PvP system, where players join a faction, they fight for that faction, and they work with other organizations within that faction towards a common goal. But since it doesn't look like we're getting anything like that, I want to talk about how I feel about all of this. Because while I personally stand to benefit from this, since we have a large, well-rounded organization that is recruiting, by the way, quick plug right there, I'm far more concerned about the enjoyment and longevity of smaller and even perhaps more casual organizations out there. And station ownership and system-wide control really goes against that. So the first thing I want to discuss here is a general problem in philosophy with having games where this is typically a core of the game or an end game for it. If you have a system that's very cutthroat and is org versus org, and the rest of the game world is completely cut out from that, organizations will do everything and anything in their power to control as much as they can, exert as much influence and power as they can, and to keep themselves in that position. Groups of smaller players or other smaller organizations, or maybe even solo players, they have no chance or opportunity to participate in this. Whereas, let's say it was a faction system, players who are part of a faction would be incentivized to help build the stations, defend the stations, and attack other stations. So everybody would be allowed to participate on some level, regardless of the type of organization they're in, or rather the organization's size. Now, before people jump down my throat here, I don't want large organizations to be nerfed or gameplay for them to be nerfed. I simply want to express my concerns with the entire system being proposed. And I certainly do not want to see things that other games have done in an attempt to bring this in line or control it. Things such as organization size limits, alliance limits, excessive instancing, matchmaking, or just things in general that take away from that dynamic MMO open world feel that the game is trying to go for. I simply cannot stand artificial attempts at balance that other games try to do in order to fix this. That's not what I want here. But those systems are often a byproduct of developers scrambling to try and solve a problem that they have created by not having a faction-based PvP system. And again, I don't expect one to be in Star Citizen. We know what we're getting, and it's not that. And that's fine. Now, with all of that being said, my question to you would be, if I don't want to join one of these mega orgs, because that's what it looks like it's going to require to build and maintain one of these stations, which is another issue we're going to move on to, how will I ever experience any of this content? Or, let's say I'm in charge of an organization, and I'm not willing to play the game like a second job, which is what this would require, because what you're building can, in theory, be destroyed by other players, and will presumably require a lot of time and resources to construct. And since it requires a ton of time, in-game resource investment, and essentially around-the-clock monitoring of the station and its facilities, manufacturing, and protection, you have to have a large organization to cover all time zones, because people's schedules aren't going to mesh. So you're going to need thousands and thousands of players in your orgs, and you're going to need to be in an org with thousands of players to make any of this happen. With the way it's currently set up, or being proposed, I should say, I just do not see how anybody other than the largest orgs are going to be able to benefit or enjoy this system. And that might be the intention. And if it is, everything I'm saying here doesn't matter. And whether I like it or not also doesn't matter. And I want to be very clear about one thing here. I do not think that every single organization should have access to building a station. And I am certainly not advocating that it is something that is easy and not time-consuming. But I am more concerned with the more usual mid-sized, perhaps more common types of organizations that, when compared to the larger quote-unquote mega orgs, they are small in comparison and simply would not be able to compete or do such a thing. But the skew towards larger organizations does not just end with stations, nor does the concern of the quote-unquote rich getting richer go away with this system. As a matter of fact, the following system, to me, makes the rich getting richer an even bigger problem, because they also spoke about the station warfare and the seal tokens. I'm not going to get into the lore or any of that nonsense behind them, but if you're unfamiliar for whatever reason, basically there are a series of events that happen, I guess base battles, presumably provided by the game for your organization to participate in. And you take and capture these facilities, and they will generate tokens of some sort that you then use at the end of the week to bid for protection on planets and shielding. That way your bases become unraidable. You can probably see why this is going to benefit larger organizations, because you're just going to have more people to accumulate more tokens. And then an additional concern with this was that they said the tokens would be combined across all shards. I do not know what they mean by shards. I assume shards could mean different servers like West Coast 1, 2, and 3, East Coast 1, 2, and 3, etc., etc. Think traditional servers and traditional MMOs. So I guess Star Citizen is not going to be a one-server game, which is fine, but you get all these tokens, you bid, you win the bid, you no longer have to worry about being attacked for a week. There are only so many winners available at the end of the week, and you have to contribute to this. So the most contribution gets to protection, gets the reward. You know what this sounds like to me? This sounds like the god-awful World of Warcraft honor grind system, where there could only be so many ranks per week of a player to get like Grand Marshal or any of the higher tier ranks. That system required players to play, and I kid you not, as I am one of those people back then who did it, 12, 14 or more hours a day to compete with other people for contribution points so that I could get rank 1. And that just does not sound like a very fun system. Here's another one for you when it comes to these seal tokens and fighting for them. What happens when other organizations just get demoralized and don't show up to fight for the tokens? Does the organization that's already in charge and winning just get more free tokens? Do they just win by default? And then do they keep winning and keep snowballing? These are things that you have to think about when you have systems like this. And if they are competing with other organizations from other shards, let's say you're on East Coast 2 and the Enclave is on East Coast 1 and we are a large organization and we keep winning because we have the most amount of people or whatever, maybe we're really good at what we do, it doesn't matter. But we keep winning. You on East Coast 2 cannot outbid us, so you on your server cannot afford protection. Now, that's what I surmised from the clip because of the usage of the word shards and how it was all competing against one another. We just don't know how it's going to work. But either way, let's just, for an example, assume that we're all on the same server and we just have a lot of people. We are going to always have protection up. So then other organizations who want to fight and raid each other have to fight and raid each other, while we just sit back and again keep getting richer. We are not expending resources to fight. We are not wasting time fighting. And in essence, The most important part of the game becomes about getting those shield tokens. So every time those battles are available, I'm going to have as many people allocated to doing that as possible, because invulnerability is far more important than anything else. Because during that invulnerability phase, I am going to be able to build up, stockpile, and get stronger. You might even argue that anything outside of the shield token or seal token battle phase, whatever it's called, just doesn't matter. Because if you're doing anything other than fighting for those tokens, you are potentially putting your base at risk. This sounds not great, but we don't know actually what the system is, but that's why I'm making this video. So let's move on to the next part. Let's say that you've lost the token war and you are not able to protect your base or station or anything like that. You're now vulnerable to an enemy raid. What is going to be the result of you losing that raid? Is everything going to be destroyed? Is it only going to be able to be pilfered and pillaged? Is everything that you put work into going to be erased? How much effort is going to have to go into the construction of bases and stations versus how much effort is going to go into destroying bases and stations? Are bases and stations going to be a one-time battle that decides everything, and if you lose the first fight, it's gone forever? Or is it going to be near impossible to destroy a station? What exactly are you going to allow another player organization to take away from another player organization? And what are the long-term results of that type of gameplay going to be for your game? If it costs way too much time and way too much effort to build a base, only to have it destroyed with a lot less effort, I cannot see why I would spend too much time doing that. You might say high risk, high reward, and that always sounds good. But that is not a mantra that you can chant that changes reality and makes all your problems go away. Let's say that the reward is very good, and the material there that you get can craft the absolute best weapons in the game, or whatever it is. In order for other groups to have a chance, they must either have something similar so that you can compete with the best weapons in the game, or the best weapons in the game are only the quote-unquote best by such a minuscule value that it ends up not being worth the time and effort to go into the more dangerous areas to get the items. So then the question would be, why would I bother? Why wouldn't I just put all of my resources and manufacturing in safer territory where I can craft quote-unquote good enough weapons, material, etc., to then use that to launch raids into the more dangerous space? And if I lose the raid, whatever, I have no recourse coming my way. But if the enemy loses, they lose everything. Which takes us to the next and final question that I have from all of this. In what way does this make losing fun? And you might sit there and say, well, losing is not supposed to be fun. Well, I disagree. Because in the end, this is a game. And if the game is so harsh and so punishing, and losing is something you cannot find any joy or pleasure in, or at least can look at and go, yeah, we lost, but it was a good fight, we'll do better next time, you're not going to have much of a game. And you're certainly not going to have a whole lot of people doing it, which is then going to further contribute to the rich getting richer, because the established groups will always do it. What would be my incentive as the loser to continue to play, or to ever go back out there again and fight the organization that is still getting richer? Where is the fun for the loser? It's very easy for us to look at systems like this and imagine ourselves as the winners. Or perhaps the system sounds so intimidating that you simply do not want to participate in it in the first place, which is just as bad. Now I would like to ask you to put yourself in the shoes of the prospective loser, the one who seemingly has no chance, the one who seemingly cannot recover, the one who has absolutely no hope at participating in this type of content. Because that will be the majority of your player base. They will be the losers in this scenario. So how much are we going to allow the winners to lord over the losers? And how much are the losers willing to put up with and keep playing the game? None of these issues or concerns that I have would be present if this PvP was all faction-based. Solo players and smaller organizations would be a part of a bigger faction, and they would reap the benefits and rewards of the other organizations within that faction, and they wouldn't have to join them if they did not want to. The losses would be felt by the faction and not the individuals, and everything in general would be a much smoother gameplay experience. However, games just keep deciding to walk into this trap of complete sandbox PvP with no established rules, stability, or foundation, instead expecting players to run all of it. And I do not want players running anything in a game. But that doesn't seem to matter, because now we are getting, again, whether I like it or not, EVE Light. And our organization will do well. We have done well in these types of games. But my concern and my fear is for everybody else. Because even if I'm winning, if everybody quits, I'm actually losing in the long run. So, let me know what you guys think in the comments. Discord link is on screen. Hop on by, you can talk to me, join up if you want. We got big plans coming for this game. Hope you enjoyed it.